All right, let's talk about something that's at the core of every single new idea. Every business, every project, it's this foundation of assumptions we all build on. We assume people want what we're building, that we figured out how to reach them. Today, we're digging into the biggest and scariest of them all, the unproven beliefs that make or break a venture, otherwise known as the leap of faith.
So, let's kick things off with a story you've probably heard a million times. You've got this brilliant team, right? They're working around the clock, they execute their plan to perfection, and the launch is flawless. And then, crickets. Nothing. No customers, no buzz. They've just built something nobody actually wants. That, right there, is the startup trap.
And this is such a great way to think about the problem. Too many people treat their business plan like they're launching a rocket ship. Every single step is mapped out in insane detail. But here's the thing. If your initial calculation is off by just one tiny degree, you end up millions of miles off course. A startup isn't a rocket ship. It's way more like a car driving through thick fog at night. You can only see a few feet ahead, so you're constantly turning the wheel, making adjustments, just trying to stay on the road. And that is the brutal outcome of that rocket ship mindset. It's this concept called achieving failure. It's when you do everything right, you follow the plan to the letter, but the plan was wrong from the get-go. And it's not just about losing money. It's a massive waste of human energy. All that time, that passion, that talent, just gone. So, okay, how do we dodge this bullet? How do we avoid that trap? Well, you start by staring the riskiest parts of your plan right in the face. It's all about taking those huge, terrifying assumptions and breaking them down into something small, something you can actually test. It's about finding your leaps of faith. So what are these leap of faith assumptions really? Well, think of them as the 2 or 3 biggest bets you're making. They're the ideas that, if you're wrong about them, the whole thing just collapses. These aren't tiny details. They are the absolute heart of your vision. And the scariest part? You don't have any real data yet to prove they're true.
We do this all the time. We try to make our ideas sound safer than they really are by using an argument by analogy. I'm sure you've heard it. We're the Uber for dog walkers, or we're the Netflix for comic books. It sounds kind of clever, but all it does is hide the real risk. The goal is to turn that fuzzy comparison into a crystal clear hypothesis, something you can actually go out and prove right or wrong.
Okay, so let's make this real for you for a second. Think about your own idea, that project you're working on. What are the things that have to be true for it to work? What keeps you up at night? Those are your leaps of faith. And listen, admitting you have them isn't a sign of weakness. In fact, it's the smartest first step you can possibly take.
All right, so even though every idea is unique, it turns out that most of these giant leaps of faith really boil down to just 2 fundamental questions. These are the 2 hurdles that every single new venture has to clear. First up, the value hypothesis. And this is the big one. After the initial hype, when someone is actually using your product, does it deliver real value? Do they find it useful? Does it solve a problem for them? It's not about getting them to try it once. It's about whether they find it so valuable that they keep coming back.
And then there's the second piece of the puzzle, the growth hypothesis. So you've built something valuable. Great. But how are people going to find out about it? This is all about how you attract new customers. Is it word of mouth? Ads? Does the product itself spread? This is your engine. This is how the whole thing actually grows beyond your friends and family.
Let's look at a classic example. Early Facebook. This is just a perfect illustration. For their value hypothesis, they just had to look at user engagement. The fact that more than half of their users were coming back to the site every single day, that's insane proof of value. And for the growth hypothesis, almost 3/4 of Harvard signed up in the first month. That showed they had a powerful, built-in engine for growth. This wasn't some forecast. This was real, hard data.
So, you've identified your leaps of faith. Now what? How do you actually test them? Well, the answer sounds really simple, but it's the hardest part for so many of us. You have to get out of the building. You have to stop staring at spreadsheets and actually go see for yourself.
Toyota has this amazing principle for this. It's called Genchi Gembutsu. It basically translates to go and see for yourself. The whole idea is that you can't truly understand a problem unless you go to the source and see it firsthand. It's saying that making huge decisions based on a secondhand report is just unacceptable. You've got to have that direct knowledge. And this story is Genchi Gembutsu in a nutshell. The chief engineer for the Sienna minivan needed to understand the American market. So what did he do? He took an epic 53,000-mile road trip across the continent. He wasn't reading surveys. He was living on the road, watching real families, talking to them.
And he discovered something you'd never find in a report. In a minivan, the kids rule. The whole back half of the car is their kingdom.
So what was all that driving for? How about this? Based on that one key insight, they redesigned the Sienna. The result? A massive 60% jump in sales compared to the year before. That's the power of getting out of the office and grounding your big ideas in reality. Okay, so this really brings us to the core lesson of this whole thing. The journey of building something new isn't about perfectly executing some grand plan you dreamed up. It's about systematically testing your vision, piece by piece, and using what you learn to steer. You know, in this day and age, asking, can we build this, is kind of a boring question. With today's technology, the answer is almost always yes. The real questions, the ones that separate the successes from the failures, are, should we build this? And just as important, can we build a sustainable business around it?
So let's just boil it all down. Your initial strategy? It's just a collection of your best guesses. The two that matter most are your value and growth hypotheses. The only way you can test them is by getting out there with real customers. And you don't steer with a rigid map. You steer with a compass, guided by what you actually learn from real people. That's validated learning. So I want to leave you with a challenge. Not just something to think about, but something to actually do. What is the single riskiest, scariest assumption at the heart of your big idea? And forget about some huge, complex project. What is the absolute fastest, cheapest, simplest experiment you could run? Not next month, but this week, to find out if you're on the right track.